All right, so now moving on to a current topics that I had the pleasure to be involved with. A lot of clinicians that are out there and practitioners in the field often ask the question, once children have accomplished a more low-tech approach, picture exchange communication system in particular, or another graphic symbol set or system, how and if and how can we then move on to high technology using SGDs and related technology. The advantages that are proposed for SGDs, again, are that the additional speech output might have a benefit because there is antecedent auditory stimuli. You have augmented input. You can see the graphic symbols on the screen, and the device is producing a verbal model along with it. And there is consequence auditory stimuli. There's a feedback mechanism. Once you have activated a graphic symbol and it appears on the screen, you also get some feedback, some response from the device that might be motivating and might tell the child, okay, I've selected what I was supposed to or what I wanted to select. And in individuals with intellectual disabilities, these hypotheses actually seem to be true, and games have been shown by a research team surrounding Wronski and Sevcik from Georgia State in the mid-90s. And SGDs are appealing to many clinicians and practitioners because they allow a more independent form of communication. The voice output is understood by a variety of familiar and unfamiliar communication partners, and this might not be the case with a very specialized approach like PECS or manual science, where the environment needs to be fluent in manual science to understand the individual. So our research questions for this first experiment that I'm going to report on were, after successful mastery of initial PECS phases, can the child then move on to a speech-generating device? In an earlier systematic review, we proposed or we concluded that research into innovations to the traditional PECS protocol would be a laudable direction and should be continued using rigorous methodologies. So for this project that we will get to see now, we modified the traditional PECS protocol and modified it for the implementation and transition to a speech-generating device. We then assessed the effects on three different outcomes, targeted outcomes: requesting, social communicative behaviors, and natural speech production. And we also wanted to evaluate the effectiveness of a particular device that had been the start of a little bit of a revolution in the AAC community at that time, that had been particularly built for those purposes and was built upon PECS principles. Our experimental design was a multiple baseline design where intervention effects are systematically replicated across participants, and the intervention phases were split into initial PECS phases. We taught the first two PECS phases first, and then repeated those with an SGD, and then walked the children, I think, through to phase, for this PECS equivalent, phase 5, and also tried to assess, or did assess maintenance after completion of the 5th phase. Not every child could get to phase 5, so similar what we've seen in other PECS, traditional PECS studies. There were 3 children in this experiment from 9 to 11 years old. All had ADOS scores and CAR scores in the range of severe autism and had less than 10 functional words. We defined our dependent measures as follows. For requesting skills, we counted the number of correct requests that were done during a 20-trial session. For social communicative behavior, we counted the number of responses, including eye contact with the trainer, physical orientation towards the trainer, and any positive effect that the child was displaying via smiling or laughter. And for emerging speech, we counted the number of word vocalizations, or after, if children already made some word vocalizations that could evolve into word approximations, those were counted as well. The materials for this study involved the traditional PECS book with PCS symbols for desired items, as you would traditionally do this in a PECS intervention. And then as a device, we choose this one, the ProgStalker. And the ProgStalker at that point of time, like I said, was a little bit outstanding because iPads had not been come out yet. This was 2009. And the Proxtalker folks had designed a device where you could easily make a transition from PECs by using the same PECs symbols, and the PECs book would actually then go up on top of the device. And now instead of exchanging the picture card with the trainer, the child would pick up that picture card here and then put the picture cards on one of those 5 activation fields. So the sentence strip out of the PECs book was turned into a sentence strip that actually speaks, and then there's the speech output here on the device. The secret behind this technology is that these picture cards can actually be pre-recorded. There's very sophisticated flat portable technology into these cards. There's a little chip in them, and you can record those cards any way you like, and you can put the PEC symbol on top of it, and then the device recognizes what's stored in those cards and speaks out the message stored in there. All right. We conducted this study in our departmental speech clinic with 3 sessions, each 20 trials per week. PEC's protocol was modified accordingly. We followed the traditional 6 phases, and after phase 2, we implemented the SGD. Now I can't explain, there's a lot of modifications that went into it. In the end, there's no longer, after phase 2, there's no longer this exchange. It becomes a selection-based approach, because afterward here, you no longer exchange pictures, you activate those picture cards on the device. So I shouldn't necessarily call this a modified PECs protocol. In the end, this is an exchange-based or an SGD protocol. But it follows all the instructional strategies that were proposed in that original protocol by Bondi and Frost in 1994. Okay, I'm going to show you one example. And here's participant number 1, and this is baseline. So he has not had any AAC exposure. He hasn't learned the traditional PECs system. He has not learned to operate the speech-generating device. There's some other video coming in. I don't know where it is from. Okay, I'm sorry for that. Something else distorted that video a little bit, but I think you've seen the basics. I've given you this in the introduction. I've talked about how what prelinguistic communicative behaviors look like in severe autism. You could also see this here in the video. His prelinguistic attempts to communicate were often reaching, grabbing items. He had not learned to activate either the device or to communicate through picture exchange. Natural speech at this point was a lot of this humming, a lot of this vocal stereotypies, and no intentional vocalizations or word approximations. Okay, then this is by the end of PECs phase 1, where you teach the physical exchange of a picture card.
Apple. One more. Apple. I know. There we go. Good snack. Good snack. Good.
And I choose this on purpose to kind of show you how also the word approximations. The vocalizations turn into more word approximations. And what I think is important, what facilitates this, is to make sure when you do PECS intervention, and the doctoral student here did it very nicely, to clearly, when you hand over the desired item, to clearly give this verbal model, so that the child can connect the verbal model with the desired item. And then he was making good gains in imitating her verbal model. Okay, so this is then PECS phase 2. Now he's supposed to pick up the PECS book at one place and carry it over to a different communication partner.
Pop-Tart.
Even when she turns away, he still gets close, makes that exchange.
Marshmallow. Marshmallow.
Okay. So then we've started, and there's different, people have different opinions about this. We started infusing that SGD very early on, because our point is, as soon as we can do this, why not try it? We can teach picture discrimination and everything else from the time that the device is present. Why wait till later PECS phases, right? But others, Pondy and First, currently are proposing to infuse the SGD at phase 4, I believe, when you start constructing sentences. There are pros and cons to each. So he did the 2 regular PECS phases. Now the intervention continues with infusing the speech-generating device. Okay, and there he's picking up the symbol and he tries to exchange it, because that's what he has learned. He thinks he has to pick it up and give it to the communication partner. He's being corrected now as a prompt to actually put it on the device, and then he gets his desired item.
More fruit snacks.
And there he has already understood that what the new desired response is. And from there on, it made click in his head, and he was able to do it with the device.
Fruit snacks. There we go.
All right, one more time.
Marshmallow. Yummy.
So that, in his case, went very smoothly. Then we continued, and I can show you. We don't have the time to show you all the different phases. I'm going to show you the end phases through, according to the PECS protocol. Now we are in stage 5 with him, and he is now learning to put attributes. He has now come to the stage where he knows, pick up the I want symbol, put the I want symbol on, and the desired item, and now he's learning to discriminate between, I think it's big versus small, and a big versus small cookie or something. And now he's learning to do that on the device.
Small what? Small. Cookie. Get the small cookie. Good. Yeah, take the small cookie. Put her back.
And during these phases, we also made sure that the interventionist always read the symbol strip, this sentence strip, with him one more time, so that he had a chance to kind of understand how the symbols were segmented and produce his own verbal speech along with that sentence that he was creating there. Good. Then the iPad came on. Parents were asking, well, once we are here, what's the next step? Can we move on to an iPad? So then we designed this little app, put it on an iPad. The iPad here this is our first prototype. The iPad here is covered. I just put a handkerchief over it, paper tissue. This is the home button, because what you might find when you do an iPad intervention with kids is that they would constantly try to push the home button. So we just covered it up with some tape and paper tissue or something like that. So he was able to go through all the 5 phases according to the PECS protocol on that speech generating device. So now this is his first session trying to do the same thing, but now on an iPad. And I will explain the app a little bit in more detail in a few slides, just that you understand the pictures, the picture cards that he had in his PECS book first, and then he had them on the book of his speech generating device. They are now on the upper portion of his iPad, and then the sentence strip, or the sentence strip that actually speaks, is now down here. And again, following those sensory principles, this is not overloading him. This is clearly separated. This is selection. This is speaking. And also watch for his speech production.
I mix them up.
I want large. Twizzler, large. Twizzler.
Twizzler. There's large Twizzler. Got cookies and Pop-Tarts too. Yummy things. Put them down.
Twizzler.
In this early prototype, we had not a function for him to return the cards. And the most recent version actually has a return button, and then the return button reshuffles the cards in a way that they are randomized on this screen. That's why the interventionist always does this, I'm mixing it up. She is not really mixing it up, she's just trying to confuse him a little bit. The reason behind that is we didn't want him to fall into some automaticity. He's not supposed to always learn, I'm picking up left to right, first symbol, second symbol there, and this is always the same type of sequence that they want me to do. If we always randomize the symbols here, then we have a better chance of truly teaching him symbolic comprehension, and that he really knows what he is selecting and not just some automated sequence. Oh, I'm sorry, we should see the end of this.
I want large.
You can't touch it.
Twizzler.
Okay.
I want
I want large Twizzler.
Twizzler is a very tough word to say for young children with severe autism.
Go ahead.
I want large fruit snack.
I didn't really hear you. I want large, large. Okay, fruit snack. Say it louder.
She's really tough on him. She's really vigorous with him. You don't necessarily have to do it 3 times. You know, we've later on, I think most participants just repeat it 1 more time. The danger is it might get frustrating for the child, and they might get into a tantrum. So forth.
No. But why don't you put the symbols back?
Okay. Good. Here are the data. So requesting the first outcome that we is this participant that I just showed you, Adam, and then we had replicated this across Quincy and Jerry. For this person, he got through the 5 phases, and this is phase 1, phase 2, strong acquisition rates here. Then this is the point where he made this transition to the speech generating device. You can see performance does not drop down, easily makes this transition. Then when he was asked to carry the device around, then the performance dropped down a little bit, and he needed some more sessions to get to this level of mastery. Usually we have, out of the 20 trials, they need to get 80% correct, and in 2 or 3 sessions in a row before we would be moving on. The symbol discrimination was easily mastered, and constructing the sentence strip, the first sessions took him some time to understand. Now I have to put several symbols on this device, but he got that then relatively quickly, and it was stable. And here was teaching attributes. That was more challenging. He had to discriminate between his preferred items, and then we asked him to discriminate between the different attributes, different colors, and also adjectives, a few and the many, and the big versus small. So there was some fluctuation here till it became stable, and he had 80% mastery through a longer period of time. Notice how easily he could reproduce the attribute sentences then on the iPad, and this was well maintained 2 months after intervention. This was our most successful candidate in this transitioning experiment. This person here was also relatively successful, but not quite as strong as this first person. Easy mastery of the initial PEX phases, also easy transition here, comparable to that first person. Drops down a little bit when he's asked to carry the device. Picture discrimination, not a problem. Then when we moved into constructing the sentence, that was something he had difficulty with. Took him a lot of time to understand, or putting the I want first before the desired item. And I think we didn't do attributes with him, but he learned the more spontaneous acts where we didn't prompt him. We set up some role play, some dinner type of activity. Everybody was eating, and we didn't ask him, and he had to kind of tell us with his device what he wanted. We didn't use the iPad with him. It ran out of time, and then assessed using his use of the SGD 2 months after, and was well maintained. Now, often telling, like a same message I've told you before, there's always one person, or often one person, where you don't see such strong performances and effects. This was a third person. You can already see during phase 2 of PEX, took him a lot of time to master that. It took him, the transition was not as smooth to the speech generating device, took a considerable amount of time till he mastered that. And then I think he faded out. It was too difficult for him to master phase 3 on the device, where it is about symbol discrimination. He maintained, however, the initial phase on the device after 2 months after intervention. The effects on social behaviors. Initially, the first participant had relatively limited social behaviors, not paying a lot of attention, not seeking a lot of social interaction with the communication partner. That increased during the PEX instruction, dropped down, interestingly, when the SGD was being introduced, and that can have something to do with that the SGD was then more motivating at that point of time, and he didn't make as much more eye contact, no more direct contact with the communication partner at that point. It went up, however, when he was asked to carry the SGD around and communicate with the different people across the room. Dropped down again in phase 3 when we asked him to do symbol discrimination. He was very focused on the device. Kind of makes sense if you now have a very challenging task. You no longer look at your trainer, you no longer do make eye contact with that person. He was looking at the device all the time. Then going up slightly, not getting back to this level, but getting back to a level that's considerably above baseline, and then a little bit fluctuation. The iPad was introduced, but during maintenance, this level was being re-achieved. Similar pattern for the second person. Initially, increase in social communicative behaviors in the initial PEX phases, then slight dropped down with every new phase of the SGD intervention, but this went up again as more he became fluent with the device, as more he also sought the social interaction and made more eye contact with the interventionist, and the behavior was maintained in the end. And again, a little bit of a poorer outcome for the third person, who overall was more of a severe learner. Some increases in the social communicative behaviors in the PECS intervention, then again a drop when the SGD was introduced, but getting back to these levels that were before in the later phase, but not maintained at all, not maintained, and not this much different over the baseline level. All right. Good. You have seen how the first participant really made a lot of gains in his speech and natural speech production. The word approximations turned into almost full sentences, so very strong performance towards the end there. And iPad and maintenance phase were also at those levels. This second person, for a very long time, made very little to no vocalizations, and then vocalizations increased and were much higher, considerably higher compared to baseline, and also were well maintained. And the third person never said anything, made no vocal utterances, no word approximation, nothing during all of the entire intervention. So comes back to what we've seen before in research. Depending on what your targeted outcome is, you may see varying results. Okay, so we worked a little bit with the engineering students on refining this app, and this is available on iTunes. Actually, it's a free app, and it's called SPEAKall, and kind of follows the logic a little bit of Proxtalker and the PECS interventions, but it is not necessarily limited to using a PECS approach with it. You could use a milieu teaching approach if you wanted to. It's a very simple app. You put your symbols or pictures here on top, and then the child learns to drag those onto the sentence strip. For children that have more motor limitations, that have fine motor deficits, there's a feature that you can just hit the symbol once and it will float automatically onto the sentence strip. There is a reshuffle button here that automatically randomizes the selection area with every new trial, and there also is a SPEAKall button for a child that wants to read the sentence strip one more time and or doesn't know how to pronounce the words, how to say it. They can hit this one more time and it will speak it out right away. So a very easy, simple app, a light app to use, which we found effective for our purposes when transitioning from PECS to an SGD or to an iPad. I don't mean that for this to be in competition with existing apps. There are other great apps out there that most of you probably know. Sonoflex is one, there is Prologo to go and so forth. But this could be a good stepping stone for someone who is just making initial attempts with an iPad to kind of not overwhelm this child, but do things in small little steps, one by one. The nice thing about the iPad is also that you can take your own pictures, so you don't have to incorporate graphic symbols. If there's any item in your environment that you don't have available as a graphic symbol, you just take a picture of it, and it goes right into your picture library, and you can use that instead. I've brought it with me, so if you, after the session, if you wanted to take a look at it and try it out, you're more than welcome to. Here's on your handout is the iTunes page where you can download this. Okay, so we had good results with that iPad app for this one participant, and then we were designing a new experiment just with the iPad. And here we were interested in, can we sort of directly start out teaching the iPad with this app and repeat those effects across clinic, home, and school environments, always with different trainers in a more natural environment, starting out at the clinic, then moving into home and school settings. So the iPad with that SPEAKall app then replaces the Proxtalker. Intervention starts immediately with the iPad. And for dependent measures, we choose the requesting skills like we did before and the emerging speech. We dropped that social communicative outcome for the reason that there were too many variables in those home and school environments. Sometimes we were coming into the classroom and the child was sitting in a certain arrangement, and that would influence how many times he would make eye contact and seek proximity. And other time, we didn't go into the classroom, they sent us to the gym or they sent us to the sensory room, and the child was sitting at a totally different arrangement. There were other kids there distracting him and so forth. So we found that there was too much variability going on, and we dropped it for that investigation. It was just too difficult to get this all under control in these more natural settings. So here are, I should explain the data a little bit in more depth. I've told you this before. Oftentimes, children are sent to our clinic, and officially they have had some PACS exposure. But then when we start PACS intervention, we actually find those PACS skills from the previous school year were not maintained. But I don't know this when I start intervention. I oftentimes have to observe them for a period of time. So these blue points here are one symbol requests. Does the child make, with their PACS book, do they make any one symbol picture exchanges? The red ones would be, can they do an entire sentence? Can they do two I want and something? And baselines were low across all three settings for this first participant. So we started going in with the iPad and started actually right with phase 3. That's a little just for experimental reasons. We wanted to be efficient, didn't bother with introducing the symbol and then walking around the room and increasing different communication partners. Different communication partners would come automatically by moving across different settings. So we went right ahead, started with phase 3 of the PACS intervention protocol. Not saying that you should do it this way. You could also start with phase 1 in that format with that app. And strong acquisition rates, picture discrimination, relatively easy achieved for this participant. Then moving on to constructing the I want sentences, spontaneously ask, this is where the person is asking, trainer is asking them, what do you want? And then he's supposed to respond to it. And then this is learning attributes, first one attribute, then two attributes in conjunction with the preferred item symbols. And it went where there's not this backdrop that we have seen in the previous experiment. Very smoothly, this candidate goes through all the phases of that protocol. We did try to push it and took the iPad away. We tried to fade the iPad out at the end. And the reason for that was that I wanted to see, can this person still produce the speech, even if the iPad is not there? And when I took the iPad away, the requesting went down again. For some reason, he was kind of hooked onto the iPad. This was no longer such a strong performance than when he did do the requesting on the iPad. All right. Similar results for this individual. He did not quite come as far. He struggled when we were trying to teach him attributes. Not successful, unsuccessful, and then we determined we stopped the experiment at this point. 3 sessions in a row, not successful, then didn't try anymore. Okay, participant 3 had the best results. Here he went through the phases very smoothly, as you can see by the data, mastered the attributes, and then we faded out the iPad more slowly. There was 2 trials, and then I should say it like this. I have to remember it, and we can look it up in more detail in the protocol. I think we did 5 to 10 trials with the iPad, then taking the iPad away. He still could do it. Then the iPad Gun is 1 or 2 sessions with the 2 trials with the iPad. Then the iPad is being taken away. And the last sessions are the iPad is completely gone. And he can still do his requests, but now through the verbal model, through just natural speech. And I will show this as a video clip in just a second. Again, there's always one person where you don't see such fantastic results. Struggled in baseline with 1 symbol or 2 symbol requests, didn't have any. We tried phase 3, never accomplished the mastery, so we went back, started from the beginning with phase 1. But that was not a problem for him. Once we followed the instructional format by the PECS protocol, he mastered it easily. Took him a little bit to go through the PECS equivalence phase 2, but eventually he mastered that. But when it came to going back to teaching symbol discrimination, like in phase 3, the mastery was no longer there. And then after how many sessions? 6, 7 sessions of non-mastery on each setting, we had to stop him after phase 3. So again, there are non-responders or responders that don't go through all the 5 stages or only go through a few stages within this PECS instructional format, and it could be that this is correlated with their degree of intellectual disability. Good. For sake of time, we're going to skip this, but I want to show you this example. This is participant number 3, who came to us with having no functional speech, but a lot of echolalia. This is not as typical for children with severe autism that are candidates for AAC intervention, but it can be done if the echolalia is unintelligible and non-intentional. And we can see what his echolalia looks like during the baseline video clip.
All right. Could I have?
Get up, come on, get up. We going?
Could I have?
Mm-hmm.
Can you choose one of these?
Also had very limited food preferences, which made it difficult initially to select items that he would prefer.
Which one do you want? Can you choose one?
6, 6, 6, 6, no 6, 6, 6, 6, S-I-X, S-I-X.
Look what I have. You want the Coke?
Hold on.
Thank you. Okay.
I am the master.
Look what I have. You want the pretzel?
So he had some speech, but it was very idiosyncratic in his own ways. This halde would occur for very long periods of time. When he wanted something, he would just take it. He couldn't necessarily repeat or imitate the model that the interventionist gave him there. Good. In the middle stages, this is now teaching him the entire sentence on the iPad with the app. There's still some echolalia and idiosyncratic speech.
Can you say it, David?
Excellent. Nice job saying that's your toothpaste.
Sometimes you have to be creative. There's very restricted food preferences in some kids. And then they don't necessarily want food. They want the taste of that toothpaste. It's more interesting than any food.
Thank you. I'm
toothpaste. Say it one more time for me.
I want the toothpaste.
But it was not so difficult for him to then pick up what the speech output was on the iPad and re-imitate those words.
You say it. Good job. Yes, it's your toothpaste.
Okay. And now we took the iPad completely away towards the very end, and here's a session.
How do you ask? Oh, I'm a big candy cane. You want your big candy cane? There's your big candy cane. Can you say it in your big voice? You want big candy cane? Nice job. You want big candy cane? Nice job. A big one. Can you say it one more time? You want big candy cane? There's your big candy cane.
Okay. So the performance in the end was the same. He could make the requests with his own words and no longer needed the iPad. Also, it was going a little bit quicker. He liked the iPad. He was pretty much hooked on the iPad. But for counting the number of requests, the data were exactly the same. There's various stories in the news about the iPad app. If that interests you, you can go to this link and take a further look at it. I'd like to acknowledge the funding that I had for this project, and also the support that from Foxtalker, the company that did the earlier SGD, for providing the devices. Our thanks go very much to the families who agreed to participate in our research. Okay, and we have some time left for questions. Yeah.
Was there any kind of explanation or notice of the fact that his self-stimulating behavior was drastically reduced in the last?
That's a good idea. I didn't look at it. I would have to re-evaluate. I would have to come up first with a good outcome measure, seeing how would I measure the. You talk about the hand flapping and the stereotypical behavior and the stuff. So. Now we have only seen a small sample. You know, I don't want to overextend the statements here. The conclusion that we can draw. It could be that this intervention also had some type of impact on his stereotypical self-stimulating behaviors. That would be another line of analysis. The intervention, however, did not directly target this. Yeah, so.
Did he carry any of that over into mealtime at home?
Yes. And we have more. I only showed you what we did in the clinic. He could do the same thing with his play toys, his behaviors at home. His playroom was our setting at home. He did it with sensory materials in the school. And when we were done, the parents were told to encourage his natural speech production by always, when he wanted to grab or reach or do stuff, say the whole word or use your big voice when he was just whispering. And from their reports, we know that he kind of generalized. Again, I did not expect this type of success with him. It was very experimental. Usually I don't necessarily take a kid with high echolalia, but it was worth a try. I didn't assess the response generalization. I currently have an experiment where I'm doing more for response generalization, but you know, when you start working with the children, you don't always expect everything, anticipate everything.
With the food preferences, did you have to choose between, because it said the big candy cane, what of those choices? Was there a small?
Yes, there's a small candy cane and a big candy cane. There is a small cookie and a large cookie, and there was also other attributes. There's a few and a many. The marshmallows come in few and in many, And there's also, I was thinking about chips, few chips, and many chips on the candy cane is something that it's like it fits the taste of the toothpaste. He has this preference for these minty type of flavors, and as you could see, he never digested the entire candy cane. He just wants the taste of it and then spits it out into the trash bin.
So the big candy cane and the small candy cane were both choices on the plate at the same time, so we differentiate between the two.
Yes. So there's also an experimental reason why this is being done. And you could see that she had to spend a lot of time rearranging those. You're doing a correspondence check after each trial. For him, he probably didn't need it anymore by the end of the intervention. But for other kids, this is very important to do because they could make one message. They could give you one message on the iPad or the SGD, but then pick a totally different food item. And again, you don't want them to fall into some type of automated response, generating a message and always knowing all the desired food item is over on this side. So the randomization aspect that's on the display and that's also on the tray, that is very important to assess, are they truly coming up with symbolic understanding? Oh, wait a minute, let's start in the very back, then second and third.
In your opinion, is eye contact as a value or behavior somewhat significantly diluted with the use of SGDs because fluency of output is paramount? It almost like an antiquated part of the communication process. And does that not risk the participant being less socially reinforcing because us needy neurotypicals look for eye contact as part of communication?
So is your question if how much value I think is in the eye contact measure?
You find that the eye contact in general is less valuable as you become more fluent with the SGDs.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's less valuable. The reason we had this entire social communicative measure there, we didn't only assess eye contact, also counted smiling, laughter, and seeking proximity with the communication, turning yourself towards the communication partner. Those are all very important social behaviors in children with severe autism. Some do very well with eye contact. The way we had this mixed up is that some automatically do very well with eye contact. So you already get a lot of eye contacts, but they don't do less well with orienting themselves or showing any type of emotion. Others do better with showing emotion, smiles and laughter, but seek very little eye contact. So we counted several of these as anything that was occurring in this domain as a good social response. Now, however, the intervention itself does not specifically target these. It's an ancillary measure and a secondary measure. So the hope is that maybe as an add-on, this would also improve because communication is never just about the word utterances and generating the right output. Communication is always also looking at the communication partner and so forth. So I think it is important to, whenever you can, to take this measure. But like I said, sometimes we weren't just able to follow through with consistently taking it.
It's interesting because it's a much different behavior when you have verbal speech because you're able to gauge the person as you're communicating with them, whereas if your communication is through that device, you lose communication time by looking up and then reorienting.
Yes, definitely. And we haven't really come up with a way of integrating this all. There's always folks that are talking to me and saying, listen, you got to come up with an intervention where all of this is the social interaction interventions and the AAC interventions are interwoven and being mixed up with each other. But you've seen how what the research, what the current level of research is. We are still interested in the more basic effects and then moving into more comparative efficacy research. Research hasn't reached this level of complexity that we would be able to combine everything in a treatment package, what we are suggesting, and then maybe come up with even better results. There was a couple of people here on the...
I found the feature where in the software that you used where it reshuffles the cards very interesting to stop a student from just falling into a growth response pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any students before the study before an intervention of introducing the device who engaged in it might have had some man skills with PECs or whatnot, but who engaged in scrolling, where they would pick, there might be a variety of foods. They may not be asking for what they truly wanted. For example, I have a student that's using.
I've personally not had this experience, but I wanted to make sure this doesn't happen. There's a 2009 study by this fellow, Jeff Zigafus, that got a lot of attention, and he was able to show that during exchange-based approaches, a lot of children, or some children, he had a small N study, single subject design, children are not looking at the picture. They are not understanding the symbolic nature of it. They're just exchanging it and picking whatever is available. He did isolate what we just talked about, providing them with that correspondence check through the tray. He did this very extensively. He did his own experiment on how many times do children from the tray pick the right item when this is randomized, and very often they didn't. Zigafus, it's on the handout. Jeff Zigafus, S-I-G-A-F-U-S. There's a 2009 study by him where he's showing that this very often happens. So we wanted to make sure we are dealing with this, preventing this from happening. Common concern.
The participants in the last two studies that you presented,
Yep.
who I believe almost never made any requests during the baseline phases, had they been receiving any type of intervention targeted at teaching requesting prior to the beginning of the
See, this is what I don't always know. I have a very bad handle on what has been done before they're coming to our clinic. And people say different things. Sometimes officially they had PECS intervention in the previous school year. Now what that means, that can mean different things to different people. Sometimes it means they actually have, I've had people who came to me with a fully loaded PECS book, and I think they had at least phases 1 and 2. But sometimes this means they were just using the PECS symbols, but not necessarily in the PECS book for communicative exchanges. They might have put those symbols on the refrigerator or on toys just for choice-making purposes or something like that. So this is why we take all of these baseline data to see where is someone prior to intervention, and in the end what counts during baseline, if they don't show one symbol or two symbol requests, they don't master it for whatever reason, then we start where we think the appropriate phase is.
So for some of the participants, that this may very well have been one of the first times they had a very intensely structured type of request training protocol.
Probably.
Yeah, and maybe perhaps like the first response form that they were really being taught in a very intensive structured
I find that in our school district, very few people actually know how to do PECS correctly. A lot of people order the materials, they experiment around with it, but it's unclear at this point, are they really following through with doing PECS instruction to the original protocol? Yeah.
Can I ask
Yes.
from the kind of first half of your presentation, I think when we're looking at choosing communication systems, that some of the big considerations are the development of spoken language down the road, and certainly reduction of problem behavior. Is there any type of kind of summary that you can provide for us on the different systems you talked about? If one is kind of, if there's research out there to suggest that one is more effective in increasing vocal productions or decreasing problem behavior or doing so more quickly than the other?
There's very few research on this. Now, if you're talking about problem behavior, there's another line of research that is somewhat AAC, somewhat behavioral modification intervention. This is called functional communication training, comes out of the work of James Kerr and colleagues, the fellow who recently passed away. And in this line of research, it is not so much the modality, how to replace the problem behavior with a more appropriate socially communicative function. It is following strictly the protocol of functional communication training. There has been, in this functional communication training approach, some people have successfully used SGDs, others have successfully used manual signs or graphic symbols, and still got the same outcome of successfully reducing the problem behavior. Okay. This something goes a little bit beyond what we've been able to cover today, but I would Google or search under functional communication training if problem behavior is the outcome of interest. And then your other question was vocal productions. There is only one or two studies that were under those, under the PEC summary, where PEC was compared towards sign and PEC was compared toward the RPMT, and you could see there were really mixed results. So the research base is just too premature again to sort of really make a recommendation towards one modality or another. Based on my research here, I'm leaning right now, but I don't have enough data to say that. I'm also leaning more towards the modality being not as important as the right instructional approaches and following principles. If you're coming from a behavioral paradigm, we want to follow the behavioral principles, reinforcer assessment, fading and prompting, and so forth, consistently across trainers and so forth, with maintenance, generalization assessments. That to me would seem to be the keys to success. Yeah.
I'm sure you would have questions the entire evening, but unfortunately it is time to end. Thank you, Dr. Wendt.
And thank you.
The session code for session number 6 is M as in Mary, O, D as in David, 679. Again, M as in Mary, O, D as in David, 679. Quick reminder, the update to the BACB will be in Presidents 1 and 2 with Jim Carr at 4:15. Have a wonderful evening.